Hi, good morning. Rob Brown here with Brendan Martin, executive producer down in Ocala. Folks, pay attention to whatever weather channel you look at. I don't think some of these folks know come here from Sikkim. Brendan says the local guy on the TV station he watches knows what's going on. Storm might be hitting tomorrow, so pay attention. It is going to have a big effect on power, internet, you name it, in the southeast. So, telling you one thing, pray that the thing blows up and goes away, but be ready regardless. Hey, Johnny Ballpark Franks joins us here in the first segment. Yancey Porter, Rebel Yell Hotline, and Rodney Orr, Tyler Insider as well. Johnny and I, and Brendan, if he can hop in, are going to talk all 16 of the SEC. Hey, smash the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner. Allow notifications on your Android and iPhone. Get pen and paper handy because class is in session. Sidelines now. Ready to go. And I will hopefully we can get the signal. But folks, everybody's watching right now in the SEC. I mean, you name the school, you name the fan base, people are pretty PO'd about some of the teams, not all of them. Right now, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, they're about as happy as it gets. Missouri had quite a scare Saturday, double overtime to beat Vanderbilt. And I'm looking forward to hearing Johnny Ballpark Frank's take on what's happening with Vanderbilt. Johnny, I don't think a lot of people saw that one coming, but Doug Dean and the crowd on the Friday roundtable on this show, Doug was all over Vanderbilt in that game. And my 4 preseason teams, I had Georgia and Ole Miss playing in Atlanta for the championship, and Alabama and Missouri, my other 2 teams, in the top 4. Diego Pavia, that guy, that's a warrior, man. Every time he steps on the field, he says, I'm the best player on either side of the line of scrimmage. Clark Lee said it, something very prophetic at SEC Media Days back in mid-July at the Dallas Downtown Omni. He said, every player on this Vanderbilt roster is a player that this staff has signed, which means they signed off on them, that they're into his culture, not the pull over to the side of the road and quit culture. And that's a good thing. But Johnny, first off, proud native son of Huntsville, Alabama, the smartest city in Alabama, one of the nicest, best guys around. And how you doing, man? Welcome. Brendan's down there. I have the best producer in the world, but my God, he's getting ready for a storm. I hope that thing just does not hit, but they get hit in the Big Bend area way too much. Johnny, can't hear you. You might be muted.
How about that? There we go.
Much better. Much better. We'll make it work.
Yes, I mean, first of all, my thoughts going out to the folks on the coast. I spent, maybe 7 or 8 years of my life there, 2 different stretches. So been through hurricanes, understand what that's all about. That's just life on the coast. However, with that said, my thoughts are certainly with everybody. As far as the SEC, starting with the Vanderbilt, Missouri game, a little bit of upwards mobility there for the Vanderbilt Commodores. I think it's a combination of 2 things. You mentioned Diego Pavia. I mean, he is a warrior. And, is he a guy that's going to be a great in the NFL? No. But he is a guy that you want leading your team. And I saw what he was able to do last year with New Mexico State. And, by the way, who was his head coach? Jerry Kill, who is a part of the Vanderbilt staff now. I asked yesterday Mike Organ of the Tennessean. I asked him his thoughts, and he basically says a combination of Clark Lee and Diego Pavia. I feel bad for Clark Lee in the sense that it is Vanderbilt. I have felt all alone before. I said this all along about all of the sports teams here in the Nashville area prior to the Tennessee Oilers / Titans. You better have your foundation in place. And Vanderbilt had that opportunity there in the late 90s. I don't know if you can ever catch up. And this is why I'm also going to have some very harsh things to say about the Auburn Tigers and the Florida Gators as
Woo.
well.
Yeah.
But as far as look, it's still
Take a
Vanderbilt.
number.
It's and for Missouri, it's one of these things. Are they a good team? Absolutely. Have they played up to their capabilities yet? No.
No.
And that was the reason why they dropped in the AP poll. Look, they're still 11th, and that means nothing. Keep winning. You're gonna be in the 12-team playoff.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Missouri 10-2 still, but Missouri, it's still tough. We're talking. It's one thing to be physically ready for a game, but from the mental part and the emotions part, it's tough still to get up against Vanderbilt. People still see the name. I still go back to the South Florida Alabama game. You're not playing a
Yeah.
logo, you're not playing a brand, you're playing against the guy across the way. And unfortunately for Missouri, that also works in a situation when you see Vanderbilt. Look, until Vanderbilt becomes that team,
Yeah.
and I don't know if they can ever get there as far as depth in the SEC. It's still tough as a player mentally knowing you're playing Vanderbilt and your first thoughts. One of the worst teams, they're like if there is a Swanee of the SEC in the last 20 years, it's Vanderbilt. Now they will occasionally be the team where you don't want to face off against them. James Franklin had a team like that. Even Derek Mason had a team like that. And then we get to the other side of that equation, the Auburn Tigers. I don't know how you feel about this, Rob. I was seeing some posts from Barrett Salee, a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
I disagree with Barrett with regards to it's okay to criticize the players. Whose fault is it? First of all, I threw out this, and I don't know how you felt about it, but as far as the Music City Bowl last year, the fact that Auburn was a no-show, down 21-0 before you could even get comfortable in your seat. And what did Hugh Freeze? Oh, I was out recruiting. It wasn't my game plan. Last time I checked, next to Hugh Freeze's name is head coach.
Yeah.
You're the CEO of that program. You're the head coach of a program that, from a football history standpoint, one of the top 20 football programs in college football history.
13th winningest of all time. Yeah.
And you blame, and so is it the player's fault that your second option? And I had Hank Brown's dad on my show 2 Mondays ago. It's a great story. He's a redshirt freshman. Is it Hank Brown or the Auburn's team's fault that your second best option is a redshirt freshman quarterback, knowing you got a guy that transferred in? If you're using the transfer portal, you better have a guy that you're grooming. My question will be this. Who's going to be the next head coach for the Auburn Tigers? Because I'm staring right down a 4-8 record. And here's the thing. Look at how many teams are ranked. Look at how many teams are ahead of Auburn. And I don't want to hear about, but they've got a great signing class coming up. Do I see any signatures on a dotted line? How quick will these athletes go to somewhere else when they see a 4-8 record? Because here's the problem. You've got so many programs ahead of you in the conference, and you're playing catch up, and all these teams are ahead of you. How are you going to pass them if you can't out-recruit them? And do you really want to go to a program knowing if you finish 4-8 this year, which I don't know about you, but that's what I'm looking at right now from the record standpoint, knowing who Auburn has coming up. If they lose to Oklahoma this week, they will be 4-8. And how much faith do you have in a coach wanting to go there knowing, I don't know if he doesn't go this year, I don't know if he's going to be there at the end of next year. And I want to play for a team and a program, not knowing who's coming in as the head coach, and also from a standpoint of a guy that did not recruit me. And so I just go back to the point where, and Bo Wallace, who I've had on my show before. In fact, I actually called his spring game his senior year in high school when Giles County High School played Buckhorn High School out of Huntsville.
Yeah.
I've had Bo on my show before. We have the good Bo, bad Bo. He was a good Bo when Ole Miss upset Alabama in 2014. How much road have you been able to travel off of 2 wins. And remember, he cheated, speaking of Hugh Freeze, to get those wins. And I go back to, from a mileage standpoint, that was a long time ago. And look at how far the SEC has changed from 2016 to 2023. You may have been innovative back then. Remember, Alabama brings in Lane Kiffin. Nick Saban brings in Lane Kiffin, who knew nothing about the spread. And he says, hey, we're going to be running the spread. Go out and get some information. Now everybody's doing that, especially with the quarterback play. So that's my little take so far of what's happened in the football world.
Look, Floyd, I love it. Floyd R. Turbo American from the Johnny Carson Show. We need more of it because here's where I see Auburn. Talent-wise, this freshman class that's playing right now is 180 degrees better than the upperclassmen that they have very few of. 2 years after Brian Harsin signed his first class, which he wasn't announced until Christmas Eve, so he missed the December signing period. The February of 21 class, 2 years later, only one player from that class was still on the roster, Jarquez Hunter. Hats off to him for sticking it out. And then he's barely getting to carry the ball this year. I don't know the answer. I have theories, but what I see with Auburn is 14 turnovers in the first 4 games, and in the 2 losses, a combined 9 turnovers, 9 or 10. You're not going to beat yourself in your A-Day game with that. That's horrible. Now, common trend, Hugh Freeze. If you're going to criticize your players, you do that in private. I am anything but woke piece. No, I am old school, which is the right way. But you handle it in private. When you beat somebody down in public, you're not doing them any good. They don't do that in Ranger School. They rarely yell. They save it for special occasions. What he should have said was, that's on me as a head coach. I get paid almost $7 million a year to win and fix this. That is on me. I will take care of it. We've got issues. We'll work those out. I've got to produce a better product. I can't imagine what it's like for fans because we keep beating you over the head for more money for season tickets, more money now for NIL and all this other stuff. That's the frustration comes from. If Auburn can cut the turnovers out, which is a big if because that's a pattern. I think if you can do that, you're a chance to win in any game. But if you keep these turnovers, which boy, that's a bad trend. You're not going to beat anybody. And this recruiting class right now, they've got to hold that one together because there is such a gap between this freshman class and upperclassmen. I've never seen anything like this at Auburn in terms of the gap between the freshmen and the upperclassmen. And trying to bring in guys in the transfer portal, that's a quick fix. That's a Band-Aid. But major surgery is required to fix this. Look around the league. Take a look at what Georgia does with Kirby. If you want to leave, he'll say, look, you're free to leave. But if you stay here, the chances are we're going to develop you. You got a better chance to get hopefully they're saying to get your degree, to get a speeding ticket or 2, and get to the NFL. But I'm with you, Johnny. And I look at around the league, Billy Napier at Florida. Let's get to Billy. That one, first off, you can't let the AD, who anybody will tell you, Franz Beard will tell you, Brendan, Scott Strickland's a great fundraiser. But I wouldn't want him picking another football coach. They've got to fix that. But you're right. Life in the SEC is so competitive. And now we've brought Oklahoma and Texas to the party. It's going to be even tougher. So if you fall behind now, you could have conversations about things you don't want to have conversations about. Let's talk about Florida and Billy Napier.
I blame Steve Spurrier, actually. Now, Steve Spurrier got it when he got the job at South Carolina, and he looked around knowing that you needed the $1 million boosters, and he didn't have any. I think he had one. And then he
Yeah,
started winning because he got in the double digits of $1 million boosters. I blame the fact that Steve Spurrier had the power. Remember when the '90s it was dominate, like now it's Alabama, Georgia. In the '90s it was Tennessee and the Florida Gators. Whoever won that game had a path not only to the SEC championship but also a path to a national title opportunity as well. But Steve Spurrier had the opportunity when he was head coach with the power that he possessed to be able to get Florida on that path of great facilities. They didn't do it. They underspent. Same thing with Urban Meyer. And I mean, now you're talking about getting facilities that are equal to Vanderbilt. And this was just 2 years ago. So at what point, and look, you look at the coaches after Urban Meyer. And you look at the fact that they all had at least one double-digit win season before
yeah,
things went south.
yeah.
But at what point, when you're the Florida Gators, yes, Billy Napier, there's blame to be put there and placed in his lap. But at the same time, what about, you mentioned about from a hiring standpoint, before we get to that point, you're still competing with all of these traditions inside the SEC, these places with wonderful facilities. Have you been to Alabama? Go back and look at pictures of Alabama before Nick Saban and look at Alabama after. Not just the athletic facilities, but everything on campus. And that's the Nick Saban effect and what he was able to bring to the Crimson Tide and to Tuscaloosa. Where is that in Gainesville? And so at what point do you stop pointing fingers at head coaches and you start pointing fingers at the school administration as well as the athletics director? And to me, that is where the blame goes. It is not just on Billy Napier in this situation. I still go back to the power that Steve Spurrier had. And surprisingly, he did not throw it around enough to get better facilities there in Gainesville.
Well, and Brendan is pointing out, and he and his dad, Buddy, and the crowd, they Gatorbait Media, they know Florida better than anybody. Jeremy Foley did not do facilities. And remember Alabama back in the mid-'90s, Bob Backrath was the athletic director. He wouldn't let them spend much money on facilities. Remember, from 1997 to 2007, which included Nick Saban's first year, Alabama was they had 8 years where they lost, out of those 11 years, where they lost 5 games or more. They lost to Hawaii in 2003. So,
and Northern Illinois.
Yeah. And what you cannot do now is get all caught up. Here, Florida builds the Hefner Center, $90 million plus. Auburn builds the Starship Enterprise, the new Woltzote Center, which is fantastic, just in time for NIL. Okay. Now, there is 2 conversations that you have when a recruit finishes the visit and they're with their family in the coach's offices. There's really 2 words: how much and when do I get it? And I agree with what these people over here are saying. It's trying to build, you better build, though, a solid foundation for high school. But then you try to go to the portal, okay? You can try to do it. But anyone in the portal, what's the old saying about junior college, Johnny? If you're going to a junior college, you've got problems, grade problems. You pick them, okay? When you keep digging into the problem bin, you're going to have problems with these kids. And here's where we're in trouble. Damn it. Jeremy Foley was tighter than a clam with lockjaw when it came to spending money at Florida. He was Eugene V. Krabs from the Krusty Krab on SpongeBob SquarePants. He was the only one who could decide to spend that money. Florida's got money. Auburn's got money. Georgia's got money. LSU, Arkansas, for God's sakes. I mean, when you look, all it takes, though, you start winning, the money comes. But when you're losing and you're spending money just every day on everything, and you've got all these analysts and all these coaches, and you're not winning, I agree with what George over here says. I can't believe Auburn fired Gus. Well, I don't believe that, but they had to do something because he wasn't recruiting to hire Freeze. But his point was, I can't believe Florida fired Dan Mullen to hire Billy Napier. Johnny, you know Florida. Remember, the first 3 years Mullen was at Florida, didn't they go to 3 consecutive New Year's Six bowls? And in the 4th year, when asked about recruiting, he said, we'll talk about recruiting when it's recruiting season. That set off a panic attack.
Absolutely.
And you know what? It never pays to panic. I mean, Chris Doering, and I love Chris Doering. He was on SEC Network Saturday night with Dari Noka. We had him on the show a couple of weeks ago. What a champ. I love that guy. And Ben Watson, straight up, love him too. 17 years in the NFL, just a good American. I love this guy. So, bottom line is they're both looking like a deer in headlights when they saw Freeze's comments about his players after the game. And Chris Doring goes, if I'm an Auburn fan, it's time to push the panic button. You don't have a quarterback, and it doesn't look like you have a backup. You better do something. And Ben Watson was like, he looked like he just had his fingernails pulled out. And he said, I've been on the receiving end of that before on both ends. There is no quicker way to separate your locker room than to hammer your players in public like that. All the great coaches, Bryant, Vince Dooley, all of them, they did it, but they don't trust me. They did it, but they in public, they took the blame. Leaders eat last. That's Bolick 101. Johnny, I like Brendan. Brendan's got a question he has for you. What's your take on how Florida is handling the Billy Napier situation? Because you're a wise man from, of course, the Rocket City.
Well, I think, what do you want to do in that situation? Do you want to get fired if you're the president or the AD at Florida? No. So what do you do? It's Billy Napier's fault. He's the CEO of the football team, because you don't want eyes pointed at you. And we go back to what you just said, as far as leadership qualities. I don't want a leader not accepting blame for situations. I don't care if you're a head football coach. I don't care if you're a CEO of a company. I don't care if you're the president of the United States. You are responsible. Don't be saying, oh, it's not my fault. I'm doing a great job. It's everybody else. No. And yes, I know what that, if you hear me and you hear my words, you know where I'm directing that at, from all aspects of life. Yes, the alarm bells should be sounding. I go back to ESPN. They were showing Hugh Freeze prior to the Cal game. And I said on the air yesterday, as far as being motivated, hearing that pep talk, I wasn't even motivated to take the shells of shrimp out into the garbage and outside. And you know how stinky that gets. I wasn't motivated for anything. In fact, if you want to put anything in the garbage, it's that pep talk. I mean, were you motivated hearing, okay, man, you got to be Auburn guys. You got to go out there. You just got to hit the guy. I mean, that was the enthusiasm. Yeah. It's like, hello, wake up. Come on, team. Where was that? And where are the players? Where are the leaders of that team? How come you're not seeing players stand up? Does the team even have any leadership? But you can't be a leader not unless you're achieving on the field. And you talked about all those turnovers. Yeah. What is historically wrong with the great offensive guru as Hugh Freeze over the years? Bo Wallace was making some excellent points about the fact that his play calling leads to a lot of turnovers, leads to a lot of interceptions. Is it the quarterback's fault necessarily all the time? Or maybe, just maybe, it's also the play calling where the plays are being called. Yes, you will have some success. At the same time, though, if you're forcing plays because you're calling plays against defenses that you shouldn't be doing, then, I mean, I go back to that second win over Alabama. A couple of things. Bama fell behind early at home, stupid turnovers on kickoffs, etc. But, a couple of things stood out. Got lucky when Chad Kelly was getting sacked. He just threw the ball up, bounced off a Bama defender, ends up a touchdown. But people forget that Alabama had the ball in their hands, despite being down such a big deficit. Ball in their hands where a touchdown would have won that particular ball game.
Yeah, Johnny, look, there's so many different takes people can get on this, but I'll tell you, if you are the head football coach, Hugh Freeze, you name it, you cannot be Debbie Downer. You have got to project confidence. Bow your chest out. Look like a man. shave, take some pride in how you look, for goodness sakes. And you give this talk to your team before they run through that tunnel at that stadium. It is a state university funded by the taxpayers of whatever state. You take the pick. Vanderbilt's the only private school. And you remind them, you are living a lot of people's dreams. You are so privileged and blessed to put on this Florida jersey, this Auburn jersey, this Ole Miss or Arkansas or LSU jersey. You name the school. It is an honor and a privilege. You know what? A lot of y'all were born on third base athletically and think you hit a triple. You've got to remember what it took to get here. You've got people out here, thousands of them, that sacrifice and give up things so they can buy tickets to come watch you play. And you know what? A lot of y'all are just concerned about your NIL deals, and you don't give a flip about the university, getting your degree. You don't even care about each other. And until you change that mindset, until you believe in the University of Florida or whatever university it is bigger than you, and that only together can you achieve anything great, you think about that before you tap on this wall that says, I will play like a champion today, and you run out there. And when you want to quit because things aren't going well, you think about those people in the stands who love you. Those kids, this is the first time they've ever been to a game in their lives. The people that sacrifice, that work double jobs. You wouldn't believe the stories. We all know them of the fans. Yeah, you've got your big donors, but most of the people they're just scraping it to make it happen. And you better thank God that they care, because when you quit getting the stands full and apathy sets in, you're done. So you remember that today. When things don't go right, you better find excuses to win. Let's get out there on the field and let's kick some ass today. That's the kind of coach I want, not Debbie Downer and Wendy Weiner. Oh, we had to fly across the country to California and play the Bears. Embrace the opportunity and say, what a great opportunity to go across the country and put this brand out in the Bay Area. What a great opportunity for the kids. I am so fired up, I can't sleep. Instead of complaining about the travel, you're getting $6.5, $7 million a year. People would crawl on broken glass naked for 20 miles to make that kind of money. Good
I got
God
a couple
Almighty.
of takes. I got a couple of takes. First of all, I saw Charles Todd Sullivan. I guess he's now a psychologist because he thinks I'm insane blaming Steve Spurrier. Charles, what I meant by blaming Steve Spurrier, of anybody in that situation, Florida in the 90s, Steve Spurrier, a former, we're talking about a Heisman Trophy winner, Florida's first Heisman Trophy winner, making Florida relevant as a head coach there when Florida was not relevant as far as football. He had the power, and I understand it's a land grant situation, and I get all of that. He had the power to move mountains, and yet he didn't really push it. It's like, okay, we'll keep on winning. And why necessarily? Well, how about the fact that, at that time, he could get the players. He could tell, Danny Warfel, why go to Florida State when they're already winning? Come and play for the Florida Gators and help us get our first national championship. That was the conversation. And he was able to get those players. So if you're having success, are you really going to push and do the extra effort? Going back to Hugh Freeze, he spent so much time and so many years looking for that next opportunity that's not a group of five program. He spent so much energy revamping his whole brand, per se. You wonder how much and what a toll that took on him. Meaning all that energy. We always talk about like teams that are behind in ball games and they spend all that energy to get back within a field goal or with a point, or maybe in basketball, get within a 3-point play. But they spend so much energy getting back to the equal part.
Great point.
Then you need that extra effort to get over that. And you just wonder where that is, where that energy level is. Is it one of these things just happy there, you get back? It's almost like a minor league baseball player had a chance, had a taste of the major leagues, of the big show, and then you get sent back down and you spend all that extra energy, extra batting practice, extra fielding practice just to get back at that level. But then mentally, people keep forgetting the mental aspect of all sports. And even in the business world, same thing applies. You spend all that extra energy to get to that point, but then you have to really push it even further to have success. Auburn is so far behind now. Look at all the teams you're looking up. Auburn is now in the conversation with Mississippi State and Vanderbilt as the 3 worst teams in the SEC. Let that sink in. Auburn in football, with all the things that you have there from a recruiting standpoint, the great fan base, the great facilities. I mean, look at Oklahoma playing Tulane. Nobody cared about that game. And this is the SEC. Look at the Auburn Tigers playing New Mexico. It looked like an Iron Bowl as far as the atmosphere for that game. So you got all of that. You can show recruits all of that. What's the problem? I could recruit the Auburn Tigers, and I grew up a Bama fan in a household of Auburn fans. I could sell that program. Where's the enthusiasm if you're Hugh Freeze? I don't see it. I want to see the enthusiasm of Cadillac Williams. Did I think Cadillac Williams should have been the head coach? No, not at that level. But I want to see that. I want to see, like, when Butch Jones got the job as head coach at Tennessee, I said that week, terrible idea. You know why? Yeah. Because Butch Jones was already making excuses for games coming up in a few days of why they lost before they even played the game.
Yeah, you cannot do that. And look, I will say this, and Yancey Porter, Rebel Yell Hotline, check it out.
Hi, Yancey.
Monday nights, 6 p.m. on Sports 56 WHBQ in Memphis and Super Talk, Mississippi. And Johnny, stay on board if you can. A lot to talk about. Let me say something about our awesome sponsors. Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee, open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m., 6 p.m. They've got Barber, STS, Filson, over 7,000 pairs of men's and women's boots. Great looking, all the duck heads, Stetson, you name it. They've got it out there. Call them up. They'll ship you stuff anywhere, or go in the store on the square in Collierville, Tennessee. Also, want to say about the Vitamin Shop in Oxford and Olive Branch, Mississippi. Love these stores because the one Yancey in Oxford is over off of Jackson over there next to Dick's Sporting Goods. You can order anything online. Go in those stores. Tell them you heard about it on Sidelines. I use the prebiotic. I use the shot blocks and the goo for working out and that stuff. But they've got a staff of people that are trained and they know what they are talking about. A novel concept. And Coolmore Logistics and Transportation. Anything that you need shipped anywhere. They are Memphis-based with a global reach. Steel coils, lumber, cotton, any products. They've got LTL, less than truckload, full containers, vans. They can ship it. When they get the call, hey, we've got to ship something from Atlanta to Dallas or anywhere, they put the word out, and within a matter of minutes, their phones blow up, and they've got a great network of drivers, okay? So proud to have all these sponsors. You can find all of our sponsors on the website at sidelines.live. Yancey, what Johnny and I are trying to say is we got to shift the narrative to everybody making it about these players and how much money they get and everything. They need to remember before they run out of the tunnel, I don't care who you're playing. You got the Georgia Southern Ole Miss game the other day. It was a great crowd there. Ole Miss won. I know you would rather be playing an SEC team, but there are a lot of people, that's the only ticket they can afford, or they bought them on the street or whatever like that. But you got to remember, you are living the dream of thousands of people, millions of people out there collectively. Every time you run out on that field, and if you're feeling sorry for yourself, you can't do that. You got to remember there's things in life bigger than you and your NIL deal and your ability to transfer in the portal anytime things don't go your way, and start remembering and man up. We're supposed to teach the lessons of life in college. It's time that we start hammering back as fans, because soon, if we don't watch it, we're going to have boycotts. Johnny's right. Look at those Auburn fans. They're doing everything you ask. 90,000 there for the New Mexico game. It doesn't matter who they're playing. They're packing them in there. And then they're hitting you with the NIL. Then Tennessee does taxation without representation. A 10% talent fee, Johnny. What would Patrick Henry be saying right now from his grave? I give the gavel to the great man, the elder statesman from the great state of Mississippi, Yancey Porter. Yancey, welcome this morning.
Hey,
how's everybody doing?
Yancey, I think it's just one of those situations. If you're a booster, so you just don't do the money handshake anymore. You're just doing it when you buy your ticket. So, hey, everything's good.
No more handshakes.
That's right.
Times change, and you got to change with the times. That's just the bottom line.
Well, Yancey, I got to say this about Ole Miss. Lauren Meadows, and I love Lauren. He's part of our show and the Buddy Martin show and Gator Bait Media. He did the doubleheader Saturday.
Yeah.
Florida at Mississippi State in the timeout game, 11 a.m. in Starkville. Then he went up to Oxford and then spent the night in Memphis and flew out about 4:15 Sunday. And he said the Ole Miss people were so hospitable. He had on Florida stuff, and they were like, "Hey, man, how about a beer?" And Lauren goes, "I'm hungry. You got anything to eat?" They were like, "Hell yeah, come on in here." I mean, he said, he goes, I didn't get to personally meet Yancey. We talked.
I know it. I hated that.
How busy it is on game day. But let's talk about the Ole Miss Rebels. You getting ready to play Kentucky Saturday, whatever else is on your mind. Johnny Ballpark Franks is on with us right now. Rodney Orr hopefully going to come in a second. Our own version of the Grand Ole Opry of SEC sports.
Yeah, first, before your wife told me y'all got some new phones over the weekend.
Oh, my God.
So did I.
I don't have a phone
So
right
it just
now.
automatically gave me a software update while I was on the first time, so I apologize about that.
No problem.
Us over in 50 are not the most technology savvy people. So
you're correct, sir.
yes, I heard you briefly about Auburn, and it's real simple. I mean, Hugh just made a probably, and I'd love to talk to him after the season's over and get his rationale behind it. He's just made a strategic mistake not getting an experienced portal quarterback this all season. That's all it is. I mean, all this making a mountain out of a hill. He didn't forget how to coach. He just made a really bad mistake. He went with the returning quarterback last year from Auburn, and it just hasn't worked out. I don't know why he did not go get a portal quarterback. I really don't know. We all know that he's trying like Dickens to get Deuce Knight out of here at George County, Mississippi. But he's going to be a true freshman, so he's got to go get a big-time experienced quarterback. When he does, everything else will fall into place.
Yeah, and
that's football in today's game.
I'm gonna agree with you real quick before we go to Rodney Orr and bring him in too. I talked to the wisest Auburn media guy that I know, my mentor for 45 years in radio and stuff. And he said, Rob, it's pretty simple. Everybody's mad, but Hugh rolled the dice. He banked everything on Peyton Thorne being better. I'll go get him skilled players at wide receiver and all that stuff, and it'll work out. And it didn't. Freeze didn't forget how to coach. I'm just mad at him. Here's the thing. I know he's mad, but I wish he wouldn't show it. And that's the problem. I know some people like you and some other people that know him well. I'm trying to tap into his brain. I just, as a fan, in full disclosure, but I love all 16 of these schools. That's what's so fun about doing this show. You gotta look. You can't look down. You've got to look optimistic and show pride. Pain's temporary. Pride is forever. I got a T-shirt that says that, okay? Rodney Orr, Tighter Insider, it's only $48 a year since 1996. If you follow Alabama, if you love Alabama, and you want to be with somebody who knows the Crimson Tide, who is a straight-up guy, an author of a great book, Bigger Than Bama, just a great guy, great man, grandfather, father, Rodney Orr, Tighter Insider. Jump in here. We got Johnny Ballpark Franks in Nashville and Yancey Porter, Brendan Martin holding down. And say your prayers, folks, for the people in the Big Bend of Florida in the path of that hurricane. I hope it doesn't hit, but Brendan is as great a guy as there is. But Rodney, jump in here. What say you about this Alabama-Georgia game and the crazy state of affairs? But we love it. It's called SEC football. Too much coffee.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? It's already been pretty hectic around here, with this game in itself, and now, you're going to have a visitor coming in. I'm just kind of looking at that perspective of it. When Donald Trump gets here, I mean, this is kind of. I got to look at it from a media perspective, guys. I mean, I'm going to have to get there about 4 or 5 hours early. Man. But anyway, yeah, no, I think it's going to be real interesting to see, just how Alabama matches up physicality with Georgia, because I think, that's what it's going to take. And really interested to see how DeBoer approaches this game, how they approach the game plan against Georgia, which is, defensively probably as talented or more talented than anybody in the country. Really physical team up front on offense. So just kind of looking forward to seeing how Alabama matches up.
This is the game everybody's been pointing toward, I would say, up to this point. So far, Kalen DeBoer, there's a reason why he's 108, 107 and 12.
You can go ahead and pack that extra one on.
Do the Gazindas, the math, 108. There we go. But so far, so good. I mean, I don't know what's different from last year to this year, other than maybe the players are saying it's a little looser, a little more laid back, whatever. But it's all still about winning, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. I mean, there are some differences, obviously. Nick Saban was real old school, obviously. And, DeBoer, when they say laid back, people get the wrong kind of vibe that it doesn't mean that you're not, that you're not disciplined and that you don't preach discipline and all of that stuff. It's just, there is a little bit more of that. I think the way the players have kind of adjusted to DeBoer has been really smooth, really good. He and his staff relate to them extremely well. And I expect Alabama. Look, I think one of the things is, and you know what, I'll be honest with you. I get kind of scolded on TighterInsider.com often. I do a top 5 usually every Sunday or Monday or whatever in the SEC, and I've still got Alabama 5th in the SEC. Wow. And they don't like that very much. But the thing is, and I believe in Kane Womack. I think he's going to do an excellent job. I mean, this guy is really intense. I think he's got a plan. He's got a system he believes in. I think he's going to do a great job. I don't doubt that. But let's just be honest. I mean, right now, when you look at the secondary at Alabama, Nick Saban said it back at SEC Media Days. Everybody should know it. You've got a lot of young players back there. And when you see in the South Florida game, I counted 4 or 5 opportunities that South Florida had to hit big plays, that if it's Jackson Dart or if it's Nico up at Tennessee or maybe even Carson Beck, they hit those guys. Those are touchdowns. That's 4 or 5 plays, Yeah. And you look at the same thing happen against Wisconsin with a backup quarterback. They had opportunities to hit a few big plays because guys were running free. Yeah. That's not being critical. That's a concern, right? Yeah. And it's a concern when you look at South Florida and Wisconsin. They run for 350 yards. Combined, they run for 350 yards. Yeah, that's a little bit of a concern when you see you're getting gashed on. Now, I understand third down defense has been really good. Scoring defense has been really good. Those are all great things. But those offenses you face, they're not Ole Miss. They're not Tennessee. They're not people that can take advantage of these weaknesses. Yeah. So pointing things out like that, Rob, is not being critical. It's just saying, hey, this is stuff that you have to get cleaned up.
Right.
Yeah. It's
Rob,
transparent.
Can I weigh in that I think we're missing a huge storyline, but you know who's not missing it? The Georgia Bulldogs. I had Chip Towers on yesterday, and I brought this up to Chip. He covers the Bulldogs, longtime reporter. He's with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. If Georgia loses this game, in which I think they will Saturday night, Georgia's season is in trouble. People are not bringing up this story. There's more pressure on Georgia, because they've got a trip in October to Texas. They're going to lose that game. So if they lose Saturday night, which I think they will, that's 2 losses. And remember, they still have to go to Ole Miss in November. They still have to play a rising Georgia Tech team. If Georgia loses this game on Saturday night, which I predicted they would do, then Georgia may not even make the playoffs this year. Let that sink in.
Johnny, let me take it one step further. this is what I said too, and that's a great point you just made. But I said that Kentucky game, how big was that? I mean, if
Oh,
they lose that game,
Woo, God.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yancey, let's
Yeah.
get your thoughts on this Ole Miss angle. Now, this is the first conference game, Kentucky, and everybody's asking this question. Not everybody, but I've seen it on SEC Network. The defensive line. You've been right. You always are. You're the canary in the coal mine about the 12 defensive linemen that they feel like they can trust. You got Kentucky Saturday coming to the vault. Let's talk about that atmosphere. What do you think's going to happen? And like Johnny mentioned, you got Georgia coming up, but all that matters now is Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Ole Miss, it's just all about working on. It's all about working on your flaws, right? So and that's no disrespect to Kentucky, but if they lose to Kentucky, then they've got bigger problems than anybody imagined. So,
Yeah.
they got to work on the short yardage situations. They miss Q Judkins, Quinshawn more than
Yeah.
anybody can ever realize, and the Ole Miss fans didn't want to admit it because they were bitter that he left, and supposedly he was a bad apple inside the locker room and all that. But regardless, he was a hell of a football player, and
Yeah.
he converted on 92% of his runs at Ole Miss on third and fourth with 3 yards and less. He was a healer.
Wow.
He got a job. And so
Wow.
that is what they're missing right now. That if you're going to nitpick the team, can these smaller running backs that they're relying on right now, Henry Parrish and Jones, can they convert those? Do they have to keep bringing in a 320-pound defensive tackle on J.J. Piggies to convert on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1? Because you can't sustain that all season. They've got Rashad Amos from New Mexico that transferred in that has been very little used this season, and he's a 245-pound back. When he has come in, he's looked good, and he's converted those. So can they get him more involved? And then finally, Bentley, the running back, I think he's got like 6 or 7 carries the whole season, and
Yeah.
nobody understands what's going on with that. So that's really what this game is about, honestly, is working on their weaknesses. And right now, if you're going to pinpoint one, it is getting physical when everybody in the stands, including your wife, next to you knows that you're about to run the football, and can you convert those third and fourth downs?
Yeah. And I want to say this, George, Yancey and I both, neither one of us are saying Freeze shouldn't have gone out and found the quarterback. We're just giving our opinion that he rolled the dice and thought Thorne would be better with better players around him, but the same problems that are plaguing him continue to do it. And let me say this about J.J. Pegues. In my opinion, Yancey and guys, I think he's the football equivalent in terms of a big fella athletically of Charles Barkley. That's how good I think this guy is. So, your take on
Rob,
that, Yancey.
but
Or somebody.
I was going to ask one thing about that. Here's the problem. I don't care what position you're talking about. To be a better football team, you have to push players in practice, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who is going to push Thorne? A redshirt freshman? A true freshman? You need to bring somebody
agree.
else in just to make you better. Maybe he won't be the starter, but he can make Thorne better just by the pure competition in practice. That is where Hugh Freeze made a major mistake. And I'm going to tell you right now, at 4-8, Auburn will have a new head coach in year 3. Next season, it will not be Hugh Freeze on the sidelines.
Well, I
Well,
don't see him.
that would be a tragic mistake on
Yeah.
Auburn, and that would be so Auburn to do something like
I
that.
know.
Because let me tell you something,
Java.
Hugh Freeze can coach. He's recruiting his tail off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get him a quarterback in there, and the whole thing they're singing about how can we keep Freeze. So just
Yeah.
I know he made
I'm
a
with you.
strategic mistake by not going to get a portal quarterback and forget pushing Thorne to play right now. They need a, but it is what it is. They're
Yeah.
not going to fall from the sky out of parachute, and he's going to get one in week 5. He's got to go with what he has. So now he has to scheme around the weaknesses at quarterback. He's got some good receivers. This is when the coaching is really going to come out, right?
Yeah.
He's going to have to scheme around not having a quarterback until he can get one in the offseason. He's got to go get Deuce Knight in this offseason, but he's got to go get a portal quarterback because you darn sure can't go into that season with a true freshman quarterback who I've seen grow up, since he was in 8th grade playing down there in George County, Mississippi, watching him through these years. He's still raw. He still needs a year or two, honestly, 2 years of really tutoring before he can, be an impact player in the SEC. So Freeze has just got to go get a portal quarterback and go scheme around. If the Auburn fans got impatient and fired him, if things turn sour this season, then that's on Auburn.
Yeah, if you do that, you're going to fall into the trap, Rodney and guys, that Tennessee did when they ran off Fulmer and they went from 2007, which was his next to last year, all the way to 2022 before they had a double-digit win season. And I would, if Auburn were to fire Freeze, that would be the stupidest thing imaginable. Look, he should have had a better quarterback, but he didn't. But that's what happened. And the recruiting and everything else he's doing, it's on fire. You've got to show progress going forward. Rodney, there's what they do. You put one mouse in there, everything's fine. You put another male mouse, they start fighting. You put a female mouse in there with two male mice, it gets pretty intense. How about that quarterback room at Alabama? My goodness, behind Jalen Milroe, you look at Ty Simpson, Dylan Lonergan. Talk about the depth over there because, man, Mississippi State lost their quarterback against Florida. Chapin, he's out for the year. I can't remember so many key players on so many teams. Harold Perkins Jr. at LSU, just out. Rodney, but you've got a hell of a quarterback room there. Let's talk about it.
Well, I really like Ty Simpson. I really like Dylan Lonergan a lot too. Both of those guys, very smart. They know how to run the offense. They know the system pretty well. They've kind of adjusted to it really quickly. There's no doubt. Here's the thing, though. We can sit here and we can talk about, how much talent they have. They certainly have a lot of potential. The question is, or the thing is, they just don't have much experience or game reps or any of those things. So you never know how that they're going to respond if they had to play. And again, you think that they would probably respond well. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But still, it's just the experience factor, that goes with those guys. But the extremely talented, there's no doubt about that. You talk to people around and they say that, inside the building, they say that Ty Simpson is a guy that's going to be the way it was phrased to me, he's going to be a stud. He's going to be really, really good. And Lonergan, for that matter, has all the potential too. And they've got a kid they committed. Go ahead and mark this name down, Keelan Russell, who plays at Duncanville, Texas, who's a legitimate 5-star. He's got a little bit. He's 6'4", he's about 180, and he reminds you a little bit of Jaden Daniels. He's really good. He's really good.
Well, and let me tell you, I'm getting a lot of comments coming in from these viewers. Absolutely accountability and transparency. You know what? I know it's a crazy idea, but I'm going to say it. If I'm the athletic director at an SEC school and I'm trying to fix things, I'm going to welcome the reporters back to practice because that we need to do that because Rodney, Kirk McNair. August 19th, I was so lucky, man. Logan told me, you got to talk to Kirk McNair. I met him at SEC Media Days. We did a podcast with him and Buddy Martin about just the history of writers in the SEC. He told a cool story about Coach Bryant. He said back in the day for 9 years, I was his assistant. Every day we had to meet. And everybody could come to practice, scrimmages, whatever. We had a Thursday practice that wasn't good, and Coach Bryant said, Kirk, nobody can come to practice. So I had to call every writer that covered Alabama, and it was a big group. No emails, no mass texts or anything. Had to tell them they couldn't come. Saturday, after the scrimmage, Coach Bryant walked over, leaned up against the goalpost, lit up at Chesterfield, and said, Kirk, where are the writers? He goes, well, Coach, you said nobody could come to practice. He said, well, they're our friends. We need to get back to that. Yancey, you and Rodney, and hopefully Yancey will be back with us. He's disappeared there for a second, but I just wish we would open practice back up to the writers so they can go to practice. And as a coach, you build relationships with these writers and they can help you out. Now they're just dropping by. A lot of the players, the same thing. You've got to connect to these people, gentlemen.
There's a problem with that. And as a former sports information director and media relations director, the coaches, I mean, this is old school with the coaches. And Rodney, I'd love to get your take on this as well. It's not necessarily the reporters, sharing secrets. They're afraid that, who knows, maybe somebody pretending to be a reporter can steal signs or whatever the case may be and give that information. Coaches are so paranoid, and that's the biggest reason why. And I like to get your take on that too, Rodney.
Well, I think DeBoer, I think if you kind of look at his history and talk to the people at Washington that covered him, he was a lot more open there. And I think his original plan probably called for him to be more open here, to get more access. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say I know what happened, but it kind of would seem to me that, he got talked out of it a little bit.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I think it's not the coach. I do think, and why is that, by the way? As our jobs, and I got into it in the 80s, my first job out of college, media relations with the AAA team for the Reds. And I wanted stories out there. I wanted more. If there was space in the newspaper, if there was places on television or radio reports, I wanted my stories out there because I knew I was competing against everybody else. I don't understand why these programs are so reactive instead of being proactive.
Mm-hmm.
And only time they're proactive, Rob and Rodney, I'm sure you will agree with this one as well. If there's bad news coming, guess what you also get? You get all those fluff stories on so many things else that you're hoping that you could take space away from the bad stories.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Rodney, good points.
I'll say this, and Johnny, I'm not familiar if you've ever covered Alabama or not, but it can. I do understand media relations perspective here in some ways. It can be a circus. When Arch Manning was being recruited, of course he took visits. It was Alabama, Georgia, and Texas were his top three schools, and Ole Miss was in there as well, just to some extent, but. Regardless, the guy at Texas made a big point saying, hey, when Arch Manning made his visit to Texas, there were cameras everywhere. People were all around him. It was kind of a media frenzy. But he said, look at Alabama. He said that should tell Arch something. There's no media people there. There's nothing. There's no big deal. Of course there wasn't. Nobody was allowed to do that here. Nick Saban closed this thing down, and you just didn't have that kind of access, because if you did here, you talking about a media frenzy. So there is I understand the way the media relations department has to kind of approach things here to some extent.
Rodney. I go back. I'm old school. And I go old school in the sense that when I was 14, I was able to get on the telephone and the manager of a Crystal hand the phone over to Bear Bryant. And Bear Bryant says, hey, I know you can't get to where I am now, but I'll be at this hotel where I'm staying. If you want to meet me, I'll be there. So at 14, here I was already in radio. I was a weekend DJ. I was a stringer. 15 minutes, one-on-one, no handlers, no security,
That's
nothing
awesome.
except Bear Bryant and myself. And so if it was good enough for Bear Bryant, if it was good enough for Bobby Bowden, had his telephone number in the phone book. You could call Bobby Bowden up anytime you wanted. It was right there for anyone to call Bobby Bowden. And then Eddie Robinson, the late great Eddie Robinson with Grambling, same situation. I was actually a guest on his radio show. So I don't want to hear about
that you're first of all, let me say this, Johnny, and I appreciate what you're saying, but you're talking about pre-internet days, and I mean this thing is crazy.
I think it's excuses, honestly, Rodney. You got to make time for the Rodney Orrs of the world.
Well, no. Listen, I will say this. I understand that too. I'm saying that you understand why they have boundaries. I mean, you understand why they have some because they have to kind of keep control of some things. And again, I don't know if you've covered. I'm sure you've covered a lot of big time programs.
I've covered Alabama. I grew up a Bama fan and a household of Auburn fan in
Rodney,
Huntsville.
he's
So,
tough.
I have all the greats on my show, all the guys from the 60s, the 70s and stuff from Alabama. So, yes, I've covered Alabama forever.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be this way.
Well, and I'll say this too, and again, just to be clear, I think DeBoer has made himself very accessible.
I like him. I know. I personally like what he's doing.
He's made himself accessible. He talks to media. He gives out his cell phone number. He, he allows his assistant coaches to communicate and encourages them to. In fact, not only that, I think he certainly helps kind of promote his assistant coaches to have interviews in terms of being on radio shows and all of these things.
I think he's getting bad advice. I think they're going back, well, Nick Saban did it this way, so we'll just keep it that way and limit those things. Like you, I think Kalen DeBoer loves doing those things. I go back to media days and teams that need to be like on Radio Row and taking advantage of SEC media days, the Mississippi States of the world, for example, and this to me is the culture of that media relations department, more afraid of what might be said or whatever. They keep their players and coaches away from some of those things, not taking full advantage of those opportunities.
Well, Rodney, I'm going to give you and you and Yancey both. I mean, why? You're good guys. If I'm the coach, and I'll start with you, Rodney, and then you, Yancey's back, I would want you. I would want you at practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right? And I don't think Johnny's trying to be adversarial. I mean, we are so lucky that we grew up. We had a connection, Rodney, and you've made that. I know so many people that are subscribers to Tatter Insider that I heard about you literally from the beginning of your magazine.
Let me be clear.
Rodney's one of the best. Rodney is absolutely. And Yancey, you do an incredible job.
Let's go with Rodney first.
Let me just say, I'm not disagreeing with Johnny. What I'm saying is that I'm looking at it from trying to look at it from a reason why that some of these the clamps are down here. And those are reasons why if you could look at it from the media relations perspective. I'm not saying it's necessarily right or wrong or whatever. I'm just saying that's why it is. I mean, it's been like this since Mike Shula got Franchione. Franchione was really open. I mean, had a great relationship with Coach Fran. Mike Price came. He didn't care what was going on.
It was short, but it was fun.
He cared about some things.
Hey, he didn't care if you got in the huddle with him.
He loved the coast.
It didn't matter to him, But Shula got here. He tightened to this is true. Mike Shula kind of tightened things up around here, and then Coach Saban took things to a different level.
Yeah,
this is the Saban rule. This is the Saban rule. But look, the Ole Miss was going to have practices open in the media, controlled periods right at the beginning, not through the whole practice, and then they came back and said, well, the rest of the SEC is not allowing the media, so we're not either. And it all started. And you're talking about getting stories out, but Saban showed that it doesn't matter how many stories you get out, as long as you win, you're going to get all the fan interest you want and people involved in your program. So Saban is a control freak. We all know that through a fault, but there's been nobody more successful than Nick Saban in the modern era of football. So the other coaches saw that, and we are where we are. Lane models pretty much his whole program after Saban. So, you can't even talk to the assistants here. They can't come on. They can't come on radio shows. You can't interview them. So I'm glad to hear that Alabama's now allowing that. Maybe that will. I don't know. I don't think it's going to change lanes. I think Saban's model is ingrained to him for life. But look, you can't argue now. Look what Lane's doing at Ole Miss, right? It's having total control of your program. Nobody's ever never really had that in the modern era until Nick Saban, and now Lane has it at Ole Miss, and look how successful they're both are. So it's kind of hard to argue against it when you look at the model that Saban had, and then you have somebody that tries to replicate it in Lane Kiffin, and then he's having the success he had. So it's going to be hard to try to talk coaches into going back and allowing access and all that. That's just my opinion on it.
People forget, though, Nick Saban's process. The process, they look at what he was doing at the end. People forget what happened in 2007 and 8. Besides going to all the high schools throughout the state of Alabama, what did Nick Saban do? He was on my show. I was in Huntsville for the Alabama affiliate. He was on my show twice in a 4-month period there in 2008. In April and also during SEC media days. He was doing all the local things for that first year until Alabama started rolling. And then he said, I'm going to back off on that and I'm going to do the national stuff. And it took me another 10 years to get Nick Saban on my show.
Well, that's the same thing's happened at Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin is not going to use the local media for anything. If he's going to talk, it's going to be to Lowe at ESPN or a national guy, right? He wants the national story, and that hurts a lot of local media people. But the local media people are just okay as long as he keeps winning like he is, because that puts money in their pocket.
Well, look, football, Rodney, Yancey, Johnny, Brendan, everybody watching, is a big deal. The Monday Morning Birmingham Quarterback Club. I don't know of a better civic club in America. This past season, last year, they gave out at the end of the season over $2 million to local charities. Wow. Let that resonate, guys.
I love that.
And you know what? I'm in the Touchdown Club in Memphis. You got all these fan bases. Oh, I don't like you. I don't like your. You know what they do down there, Rodney? You know it, guys. Auburn and Alabama, they swap every year the captain of the quarterback club. 1 year it's Auburn, next year it's Alabama. They rotate back and forth every year. They pull together and compete to see who can raise the most money for charities. How about that, Rodney Orr, proud native son of Mobile, who lived for many years in Corpus Christi, Texas. But, man, let's get back here and talk some games. But Rodney, what is the storyline going into Georgia and Alabama that we're not talking about, that we need to be talking about, that only the man who is Mr. Tyler Insider, and tonight at 6:30 with our good friend Gary Harris, WVUA TV 23, puts on a great 30-minute show. TGJ, folks, True Grit Journalism. And as Rodney says, what are we talking about? Well, Rob, I never know until I show up. It's like reaching into a box of Forrest Gump's chocolates.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know about a storyline that's not being discussed, but I'll say this. It's going to be really interesting to see how Kirby Smart decides to defend Jalen Milroe in this game, because I think last year his idea was to use a couple of spies in that game, and I'm sure he'll keep it changed up throughout the game depending on the situation or whatever. But it's going to be real interesting to see what does Kirby Smart do to kind of adjust to Milroe. I think he probably feels like and again, I haven't heard him say this or whatever. I'm just guessing that he probably feels like if he had it to do over again, he might have brought a lot more pressure, and again, people get on Tyler Insider, they get offended when you point out what Michigan did defensively to come after Milroe, but it's what happened. And I'm not saying Milroe won't respond to it in a really positive way, because I think Sheridan and DeBoer put him in a good position, prepare him and have him ready. But that is something that I'm really interested in, is to see what does Kirby do to try to, defend Milroe, because the guy's unpredictable. I'm Milroe. You don't know what he's going to do. I mean, you don't know if he's going to pull it down. You don't know if he's going to throw it 80 yards in the air. I mean, he's a tough guy to defend.
Rodney, you said it last year before Milroe ever played his first snap. You said, with Jalen Milroe, and Johnny, I know you want to say something, but you said something I'll never forget. You said, there's two reactions, guys. One will be, wow, did you see that? Wow. Yeah. And then the other one is, did you see that? So, and he's a hell of an athlete. But Johnny Ballpark Franks, jump back in here, and then we're going to go back to Yancey for the big story in Oxford. By the way, Yancey, Love the front cover of that Oxford magazine that you produced. You had the family, royalty in Oxford, I might add, of the Beacon, home of some of the best breakfast, lunch, food anywhere. You got to love a meat and 3 or an M16, a meat and 16 sides. Johnny, jump in here.
Yeah,
I
Ronnie, I have
love
two
it.
quick questions. I'm sure the Bama fans want to know the issues, especially in recent years, with it's not the penalties from effort, it's the penalties from a mental mistake. And
Yeah.
then the other thing with Kirby Smart, you covered him when he was at Alabama. These coaches, they don't think about, for example, the one win Kirby has winning a national title. What haunts these coaches is what they could have done differently in the losses. And they're starting to add up for Kirby Smart as head coach with the Bulldogs against Alabama. And it makes you wonder how much in his head he's second guessing himself about. And I think that is going to be a big factor coming into this game on Saturday night.
Well,
Yeah,
I think that's a great point, and that's something I've really thought about. And people say, well, all the pressure's on Kirby, and maybe so. I mean, if he's 1-6 against Alabama, loses to DeBoer in that first game, that's not good, obviously. But here's what I would say, and this is what I believe about Kirby Smart. He is so much like Nick Saban, and he's learned so much from Saban. He's so process oriented.
Yep.
Yeah, he knows about those losses, but I think he's like Saban. He takes those losses and he tries to learn, okay, what is it what do we have to do differently? Those other games. So I think that's what I was kind of talking about Milroe, maybe what is he going to do differently to try to defend him? But to me, he's so process oriented. I think he looks at it from a different perspective in terms of how he approaches it. I mean, that's just the way I feel about it. Some coaches may get tight around the collar. Maybe Kirby does. I don't know. We'll see Saturday night. But I still believe that he's so process oriented that he looks at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, and I think the theme of this panel today, God, this is awesome. You can't panic. I mean, look, you got to coach. You got to grind it out. Switching coaches every 2 or 3 years is the Talking Heads' famous line in that song, "We're on a road to nowhere. Come on along."
Yeah, it sounds just like that, Rob.
Yeah.
Last time I played it sounds just like that.
I'm sorry. I keep my day jobs. Yancey, jump in here. I got to say, though, this panel is on fire. Go, Yancey Porter, a native of Vicksburg.
I know you want me to talk about Ole Miss, and that's fine and dandy, but
And sing about it too,
there's
Yancey.
really limited stories about Ole Miss, Kentucky, to be honest. To the Georgia Alabama game, the two keys are Georgia has not found any offensive rhythm this season, and we all know why, because he lost his blanket right there, Bowers, over there, and for the Raiders now, I was about to say L.A., but Las Vegas, and several of their key guys there on their offensive personnel. So they just have not found any offensive rhythm, and so can they find that against Alabama? This kind of is really a tough task to try to find yourself playing at Alabama, right? And then Alabama, it's look. I know the DBs are an issue, and we talked about that at length and during the whole all season. But it all comes down to Milroe, right? And Rodney is right. He is consistently inconsistent. Not only is he going to pull it down and run for 80 or throw for 80, but look, he's inconsistent, as in he's either hot and cold, and when he's cold, and we saw that against South Alabama this season. We've seen it throughout his career. And it seems to last the whole game. And so, what Milroe are you going to get? Are you going to get the Milroe against Wisconsin? Are you going to get the Milroe against South Alabama? It's all going to come down to Milroe, in my opinion.
Look, this what a panel, and Yancey, Rodney, y'all all know this. We all cover Alabama, Rodney, Ole Miss, Yancey. But for real, once the wheels are up and we're in the air, the smoking sign comes on, unfasten your seatbelt. You're free to walk around the aisles. Meetings adjourned, like a Knights of Columbus meeting. Any old business? Nah. Any new business? Nah. Meetings adjourned, bars open. So I love this back and forth. It is so valuable because y'all have been covering this stuff for a long time. Guys, we're going to wrap it up now. Just remember, folks, everybody keep your eyes on, it looks like Hurricane to be Helen down in the Gulf. Say your prayers for the people in the path of that thing. Most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. We are the most blessed people in the history of the world. We have the best executive producer, Brendan Martin. He's fighting to get a roof literally from the last few storms. I can't get any better than this guy. And the whole team, Yancey, Rodney, Johnny, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Support our sponsors. Go out and help other people today. We're all blessed. See you in the morning. Thanks for watching.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal and the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.